Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement. It is Friday, September 16th. We have a longer than usual Friday episode in store for you all. In just a moment, we'll kick things off once again with trial recap of the Hodlonaut v. Craig Wright trial going on in Oslo, and then we'll be doing a news and notes segment shortly after that. If we can, Chris, let's go ahead and roll the tape from day 5 of the trial.
It's the fifth day of the 7-day Hodlonaut versus Craig Wright trial here in Oslo, Norway. This was our second day of witnesses. We had a total of 8 witnesses take the stand. The first half of the day were character witnesses called by Craig Wright's team. The first witness was Yusuf. He was a classmate with Craig Wright. He talked about different things that they studied together. They eventually also went into business together and started a corporation. The second witness was Neville Sinclair. He's an accountant from BDO. Craig Wright's lawyer was asking a similar line of questions as yesterday, both what is your technical impression of Craig Wright and what is your personal impression of Craig Wright. The third witness for Craig Wright was David Bridges. He has a bank called Kudos. Bridges is not a Bitcoiner, and he didn't talk much about the details of the technology, but he did say Craig Wright is very educated in security law and financial services. And when asked if he thought he is Satoshi Nakamoto, he said, if there is one person that could pull this together, it's Craig Wright. The fourth witness was Lynham. He's the cousin of Craig. He gave an extensive childhood backstory in the witness. He talked about their upbringing. When asked if he thought Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto, he said,
we knew for years that Craig was the creator of blockchain and Bitcoin.
The last half of the day was the KPMG expert witness called by Hodlonaut's team. The first part of it was 2 witnesses, actually, and they both kind of shared the stand and went through a very extensive metadata report. They were talking about the inconsistencies between the paper size, between the date that they had been edited, written, whether a font existed at that point in time. They also went through various drafts of the white paper, and they were pointing out any inconsistency that they could find. The last part of the KPMG expert witness was about source code, but it was very technical. I know the judge even at a certain point assigned a longer break during the KPMG witness, as she said this is a lot to digest. Thanks for tuning in. That wraps up this week. We'll be back on Monday to resume and finish the witness testimonies.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our reporter on the ground, Mills. Mills, thank you once again for joining us. We just watched the tape with you. Anything else you'd like to add before we dive into what went down on day 5 of the court case?
No, it was a wild day. Another exciting day. Thanks for having me back, Q. It's been a fun cadence to be in. We have officially finished 1 week, 5 days, well over halfway through this trial.
Well over halfway, and I understand that today was a lot more technical in nature. Some of these conversations. Can we? Do you mind sharing some of the things that you've learned, as well as just going over what exactly were the technical components of today's conversation? What is their importance, both for this case and just the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, so there were a total of 8 different witnesses technically called today. 3 were from KPMG. So the first bundle of witnesses were all called by Craig Wright's team, and they were much more in keeping with previous witnesses. The first 3 were video conferencing call-in. And then we transitioned to a few in person, and then also had Craig's autist expert testify, and then switched into KPMG, which, yes, was very technical. And so there were 3 total witnesses from KPMG. The first 2 were about documents, and they testified together. And it was metadata, and they had prepared an exhaustive report on metadata from PDFs, from different Word documents, from emails. It was really extensive, and in some ways it was a little hard to follow, in that the bundles is what they are calling these evidentiary groups of documents. They were citing them by number instead of, oh, this email with this topic or this PDF with this purpose. So it was a little difficult to know to what they were speaking to, of the relevance of it, which was, I was hoping was going to kind of come clear. But that, I know, the judge, she knows the context of each of these documents. We just, as the people in the audience, did not. So that was very technical, to the point where they were talking in the weeds about, this font was released at this date, or this paper size is standard in the US and this paper size is standard in Australia. And the ways to kind of trick a word processor software into thinking a document's older, setting your clock a different, setting your date a different on your actual computer. It went very technical as far as all of those components, but also it was then followed up by a very technical analysis of some source code as well. So I'm not a developer. I'm not going to say that I am, but I definitely have been working at being able to understand at least the nuance that's being specifically pointed out. And I didn't particularly follow. I had some follow-up conversation. I've been reaching out to a bunch of my dev friends to be like, can you explain this to me, and the significance of it? So I do understand more or less what the nuance is, but I'm gonna pause. That was the whole recap. Q, any questions before I go into a light level of a technical description of what the source code evidence was?
So I just want to point out, we're now keeping, for those of us keeping score at home, you have obtained and will soon be a credited lawyer in the country of Norway. And shortly, once you pass the bar in Norway, you will then, of course, become a Bitcoin core dev. Is my understanding?
Yeah, that is correct. Oh, but you didn't mention that I am now a news correspondent / journalist as well. That was, I guess, implied in all of my new
Yeah,
career.
that was just understood, that on top of all of your other work for Bitcoin Magazine and other endeavors as well, that you're a three-headed monster of a lawyer, journalist turned core developer. Truly remarkable. She is single, for those men out there.
Wow, 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 wow. Let's watch out. Watch out, Q. Now that I'm fully doxxed, it's a different world. Thank you. So the metadata was very much focused on, this typeface or this character, or there's this many fonts, or, it's much more an analysis, and then also grabbing metadata from when something was published and when something was written. The source code testimony was talking a lot about, and I mean, I make one disclaimer. I'm so sorry if I do get this wrong, but there were kind of two different components where it was also talking about the actual source code and then the executable part. So the edits, and I mean, I am so nervous. There were multiple versions of edits that looked as though they were edited to be, have a little personality, as if you were, taking an essay and then kind of making it your own. So built on the source code, which had some implied, and this is sadly carrying a little bias because I am suggesting plagiarism, but there was an embedded bug fix already. So the version of the original source code that Craig Wright was submitting, the Hal Finney bug resolution had already occurred. So theoretically, it wasn't the source code that would predate that bug. Does that make sense? I'm so sorry.
No. As truly the least technical human being at Bitcoin Magazine, and especially on Bitcoin Magazine Live, what it sounds like is Craig Wright tried to copy someone's homework and may or may not have turned it in with like the corrected answer, when in fact they didn't want the corrected answer. They wanted the version of it with the wrong answer. So
Well, it's almost like there was like imagine these different iterations and these different drafts. The original had a bug, had a problem. Satoshi isolated, figured out there was a problem that was then resolved. So the base layer source code that Craig Wright had been building on already had the solution to the bug. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I am tracking, which honestly, if you at home are not tracking and I am, so
yes.
duh,
There's one other thing that
sure.
I feel less okay. So, source code had a resolved bug that Craig had built on. And I think everyone should read the comments because there are so many smarter people that are explaining this very well in a more succinct way. I'm trying to explain something I learned like an hour ago. But the other thing was that the first program release didn't have correlative changes. The changes in the source code and then in the program release, they didn't actually reflect, which normally the changes in the source code would then influence and kind of stem and inform the program release. Okay, did you make sense over there? Okay.
I am tracking. I am tracking.
So the last very technical tidbit I will add is there was quite a bit of discussion about a compressed public key that was not introduced until 0.5, until iterations through, which was in 2012. So there were we can pull out of the weeds that those were a few of the things that were discussed during the metadata source code analysis of KPMG witness.
And so what were let's back up to just the Hal Finney edit right now. I'm curious how, and my assumption is the KPMG witness is a Hodlonaut witness, if I'm understanding sort of this correctly.
So yeah, the KPMG team, all three of them, they were expert witnesses. So they are in the same way that the autist expert is an expert witness hired by Craig Wright's team. The KPMG team was hired by Hodlonaut's team.
Copy that. And so how, when presented with this evidence, how did Craig Wright's attorneys question the KPMG expert witness specific to the bug being solved?
There wasn't there was not a lot of cross witness interrogation after. It was a little bit more just a clarifying. It was, why did they have to do that change? It was a bug they had to fix. They had to remove a file. Manshaus said, well, Satoshi asked other bugs to find why. And, KPMG just said, yes, I cannot speculate. So it wasn't very much of an in-depth. It was just more, yes, Finney helped to change the code, but they kept 0.1.
Interesting.
I really do apologize if I misquote any of this, but this has been a crash course for me.
No, we appreciate you wearing so many different hats and learning everything that you've had to in order for us and all of our viewers to be able to better understand and comprehend just the gravity of the conversations happening in just this one room all the way in Oslo, Norway right now, and how it, frankly, like those conversations amongst, was it 10 with a 10v3, like, I don't know, there are like 20 people in this freaking room, and the fate of Bitcoin, BSV, and a lot of things come down to the decisions and words spoken in there. So we do appreciate all the different hats you are wearing. I'm curious now on the judge's side of things, how did the judge approach or press on the KPMG witness today?
Well, yeah, I also want to highlight the other character witnesses too, and the autist expert as well. I would say the KPMG witness, in less of an interview, it really was much more of them going through a very exhaustive report with a lot of documents. So it wasn't as much of a back and forth question. There were a couple times of clarification throughout, but at a certain point, I mean, the judge actually, usually we take a 10-minute break, every hour and a half, 2 hours. And the judge was like, let's do a 15-minute break. This is a lot to digest, which it really was. It really has been. I think the cross-examination, I know you asked about the judge, but Manshouse, the lawyer for CSW, he was in some ways kind of trying to draw that this, like, what was the relevance? Did they actually examine Craig Wright's situation and setup? Like, how are they making all of these assessments and claims without kind of knowing all? He asked at one point at length about like a handwritten piece of paper that if he would PDF it and send it somewhere, like what metadata are they going to get from that? And it wasn't necessarily clear what the specific argument was, but just kind of saying, okay, this is, how do you know it's contaminated or not contaminated? How do you know at what point it was, messed with, edited, corrupted? And then also just, brought up the point, okay, well, I open it on one computer in one program, I open it in another computer on another program, that there is all of this unknown that's very unquantifiable. So I feel like, the judge would have the judge was very much tracking with this, and the kind of landing of the plane of the metadata report was about the changes of a file systems level and not a file level, which wouldn't impact the metadata. And the judge clarified, would you have seen trails on file level? And KPMG said, I cannot say for sure, but moving from Linux to Windows would normally not change that. So it was discussing like the discrepancies between many places and not necessarily knowing if it's between Linux and Windows. There was definitely, it felt not like an attempt to get everything discredited, but a good poking of, how do you know that all of this, is actually derivative of Craig Wright instead of another source? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I want to, for a second now, let's take the developer hat off. I need the Norwegian law hat back on for a moment. In the American court system, it is trying to prove something without a reasonable doubt. Obviously, that's in cases involving a jury. In this instance, is there sort of that line in the sand where it's not necessarily something needs to be proven or not, but it needs to be almost disproven? Like CSW needs to be disproven without any shred of doubt that he is in fact Craig Wright, or that he has to prove without any doubt that he is Satoshi in order to win this case. Is there something in that vein tied up into the legal ace of everything?
I think I see what you're saying, the guilty until, or innocent until proven guilty mantra.
Yep.
To my knowledge, no. The big thrust of this whole discovery has been to give the judge the amount of data and information with which that she can make an assessment, because at the end of the day, this is a defamation case. This is libel. This is a case over tweets that, and I think actually the autis expert actually spoke a lot to Craig Wright having a legacy of being bullied and being terrorized and being, treated not kindly, and brought that more as a legacy, that then, not as a pity play, but as, kind of that this is a pre-existing, so this is bullying, and this is, something that Craig Wright has been dealing with for a lot of his life. So making it more of a factual and bringing it back to his autism as well. So I think the judge is actually trying to make this claim of, yes, this person had this understanding or maybe didn't have this understanding, the with autism being a factor as well in this ruling, that maybe also was using harsh words and saying harsh things on Twitter, but also was what was being said, was that truly defamation, or is that something that, is part of being out on Twitter as he previously was? And is that something that comes with the nature? And I think that's why there's been so much backstory on Satoshi. And I think a lot of the judges' questions are going back to, well, if he really is Satoshi, then this does make sense as true libel and defamation, because it would be more so bullying than if someone is saying they are someone and they're not. So I know that was maybe not a clear, succinct way to say it, but there is a lot of nuance within the judge's ruling to be able to make this informed, is this defamation?
Okay, so it's not going to necessarily be as clear cut as we in America may necessarily be used to a court decision coming out and just being plain and simple. There are ways for this ruling to kind of have a variety of different outcomes and conclusions drawn.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know if it's a yes or no binary conclusion. That will be my next deep dive in my Norwegian law homework that I'm working on. But I do know that there will be a definitive decision, but what goes into that, I'm not 100% sure.
Copy that. I want to go back to unless, please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to make sure we cover the other witnesses of the day, and I can just briefly. There was a classmate, a former colleague, there was a cousin as well of Craig, and that also, some of that family reference, and the judge, before the cousin started testifying, Lyman was his last name, the judge was like, just everyone knows, no obligation to testify as this is a family member. And then she said, okay, so since you're here, you are, you are choosing to do this, and it was not compulsory. But that was a lot of the data, the family data was a lot of the data that actually went into the diagnosis of Craig's autism by Clin, the autistic expert. So he cited interviews with Craig's mother, niece, that it was data gathered from, and during the cross-examination, Haukus, Hodlonaut's lawyer, was definitely saying, so you didn't have any, firsthand, it was all things that people had told you. But also the judge, very much at the end was like, so has Craig Wright ever been diagnosed autistic before you? And Clin said, no, to my knowledge, I am the first time. But he also said that's very standard in the, the age that Craig Wright is, that autism was typically undiagnosed and was not very well understood. While I'm monologuing, there was also a deep tangent on a blog or a post or something on a kind of parenting website that was discussing the parallels between autism and narcissism and the differences, parallels and differences. And Clin went very firm that, there is no definitive corollary between autism and narcissism, but it is also, he said, autism is not an immunity against having. So he was saying, yes, it's possible. However, it isn't necessarily linked. And then he also brought up, Hawkes, in his cross-examination of Clin, also brought up the Florida examination, and Clin clarified that the two main things, like, he was really asked two specific questions for the Florida court, and it was, does Craig Wright have autism? And if he does, what does that mean for the court? What does that mean for this ruling? So there was a definite, it was interesting, and I was trying to understand why we weren't allowed to film this, but I guess, there was some discussion of the, mental illness or the stigma or the misunderstanding of autism in general as well.
And I know we talked earlier this week about how one of the claims the autism expert was going to make was along the lines of Craig Wright not being able to tell a lie. And this was a piece of information that the Florida case declared that could not be shared, was not appropriate to be shared to the jury. Was that information also deemed not appropriate in the Norwegian case, or was that actually shared?
So that was shared, especially within the context that was actually highlighted in the McCormick case in the UK. So Hawkes brought up that portion, and Clyn said, I wasn't involved in this case. I'm being referenced in this, but this isn't actually my report. Made that very clear delineation. But then the part that was highlighted was actually almost a manipulation was the wording, not lie. And it was clear that it was he made it clear that it's not that manipulation is impossible, it's that it's not his nature or resting state, and not that he couldn't do it or not that he does do that, but that's not the way that he kind of operates and moves throughout the world. So that was his response. And this is a lot of degrees, right? Because this was for the McCormick case, citing the Kleiman case in Florida witness that Clyn had done, then being brought to him by Hawkes, and then Clyn saying, I'm analyzing something based off of my report. So it's not that it's tenuous, but there was definitely many layers to it. But that was a clarity that did happen during the cross-examination today.
And was there anything that Hodlonaut's lawyers in any of the character witnesses, or even with this autism expert, pried out or were trying to essentially discredit?
Sorry, was there anything they tried to discredit? What do you...
In reference to any of these character witnesses, were there any holes poked by Hodlonaut's attorneys in sort of their testimonies?
Nothing really comes to mind. I would say that a lot of it is, it's a lot of it is about both the technical and the personal. And most of what Manshouse's interviews were about were establishing their respect and credibility for Craig Wright's technical prowess within business, within, their experience and exposure to his technical side, and then also contrasting it with his personal social skills and abilities. And that was also highlighted with Clyn, and saying that Craig Wright was in the 99th percentile of intelligence, but he estimated him in the 1% of some like normal life functions. I don't know the exact words that he used. And the judge actually asked for clarity on that point. And it was the way in which, verbally withholding something you should say or certain behavior to not necessarily understand. I think that would go more towards Asperger's. I'm not an expert there either, but it was more just the social awareness and the way in which he would navigate normal life was kind of how he was describing it.
It seems as though these witnesses continue to hammer home Craig Wright's story. I'm curious if just there's anything in their stories or their testimonies. I mean, if I ask my mom to say anything, she's going to say anything on my behalf. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. Have those questions been brought to light? Like, have Hodlonaut's lawyers or has the judge just point blank asked family members, like, why wouldn't a family member lie on the behalf of another family member, given the stakes of given what's at stake in this court case?
Yeah, that hasn't really been a line of questioning. And maybe that's a difference between the Norwegian judicial system. That was a very funny moment I tweeted about today, but at the end of a witness said, I really like this Norwegian court of law. You know, it was Klin saying, compared, I think, you know, in reference to how it was in Florida. And the judge said, on behalf of the Norwegian judicial system, I thank you. And everyone in the court laughed, which was actually maybe the first time that that had happened. We had some technical difficulties earlier where everyone was a little, you know, looking around. But for the most part, it's been very buttoned up the whole time court's in session, even kind of hushed tones, even during a break or whatever. So, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of attack on the personal, and to be honest, a lot of the witnesses either are involved in business right now or have worked with Craig in the past or are family members. So there's a lot of, I guess, cross motive, or and that really hasn't been a line of questioning that Hodlonaut's lawyers have gone on.
Copy that. Mills, as we wrap up here, is there anything else we didn't get a chance to touch on from day 5 of the Hodlonaut v. Craig Wright defamation trial?
Nothing incredible stands out. I know we have a few more witnesses on Monday, and then closing statements will start, and then we will be off on Tuesday, and then closing statements will resume and conclude on Wednesday.
Well, we will circle back with you Monday. I know Monday we will have a longer recap of the trial as well as some special guests. So be sure to like and subscribe to the channel down below. Damn it, I always get it wrong. Subscribe down below if you want more updates on everything going on in the Hodlonaut v. Craig Wright trial. We will have a longer recap on Monday with Mills and some more special guests. Mills, as always, thank you for your reporting on the ground. Please give her a follow at Specific Mills to stay up to date with all of her live tweeting for the trial. While you are asleep, she is hard at work. Thank you, as always, Mills, for joining us.
Thank you, Q. Bye.
And before we cut to a commercial break, I want to let everyone know we will be kicking off a long-awaited news and notes segment in a moment. I want to remind everyone that tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale. Use promo code BMLive. Get 10% off of your tickets and lock them in now because ticket prices are going up soon, and they will be more expensive once ticket prices go up than what you could have gotten today with the discount. So don't try to hack the system. We figured it out. Like, you're not going to beat us. We'll beat you. Give them the bongo commercial, and then we'll be back with news and notes, and maybe P's going to join us. Who knows?
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Samba.
Welcome back, and thank you for sticking through that very fun commercial break. I have some very, very sad news to share that unfortunately we have submitted the missing persons report and we cannot find P anywhere. So if you do see him, please let him know we are concerned. We are worried about his health and safety, and to just let us know that he is okay. And that he definitely has to eat shoe leather next time he comes back on screen. It's not negotiable. But instead, I've replaced him with Chris, and we're going to dive into some news and notes. We have not done news and notes all week. The news does not stop, and nor do we. Let's dive into it. Unless you have anything else to say about our fallen and lost comrade.
We're just looking for P. We just want to know where he's at. We maybe want him to eat a little bit of fine shoe leather, but aside from that, we just hope he's all right, man.
It doesn't have to be fine. Like, it could be low quality. Like, it could be like shoe leather that's stepped on some cow dung here or there. But I digress. Let's do a full recap of this week's news and notes. And we're going to kick things off with Monday because that's how the week starts. Well, technically Sunday, but I digress. As of Monday, September 12th, Bitcoin has been online for 5,000 days. TikTok next block. That's so dope. 5,000 days and counting. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but there has not even been a network shutdown that would encompass a full day. So it's been fairly consistent for 5,000 days, maybe a couple of hiccups here or there.
Yep.
But yeah, Ultra Carbon, you are correct. Chris, I know that you're very against seed oils, but are you finally caving and are you going to go back on a seed oil diet?
No, there was a really cool clip out of the Bitcoin Lake or Bitcoin Guatemala. So I'm going to play that clip real quick and we'll check it out.
Lago Bitcoin wasting to hashing. Nasty use cooking oil. Oh, how dirty is it? And this is my baby right here. Mining, and guess what? It's hashing. Kaboom!
Love to see it.
So using those nasty seed oils to power a generator and then hooked up to an ASIC miner and mining Bitcoin. So very, very cool. So we don't have to use seed oils by consuming them anymore. We can use them what they're rightfully used for either lubing a car or powering a generator. So really, really cool stuff out of there.
Love it. Always love to see new and reliable energy sources. I can't believe I'm going to let you show this. I just roll this tape. I got up to some shenanigans here in Los Angeles, and I hope y'all enjoy.
Offer you water.
I bring you Bitcoin
My Bitcoin magazine. Must be in.
Does the car have to be on for the miners to work?
That's what it's. That's what it is. That's what it look like. See, that's my guy. Pull over. Pull over. Hey, I want the computer. What are you doing with the money? Give me the computer. Give me the computer. You can go in here. Go. See you soon. Better believe it. Assalamualaikum. That's what Bitcoin work. I get power from the city. I get power from the government. I get power for anywhere what I want. I don't know what I did, but what the hell is this? This is not the right car. Offer you water. I bring.
I apologize. I hope your IQs did not drop, but I had fun. I hope you enjoyed that. Chris, what is going? The Blockchain Association is making headlines for what exactly now?
Yeah, so Circle and Kraken have teamed up to launch their own political action committee called BA-PAC. I don't know how or why this is different from Coin Center. Coin Center was notorious for being a crypto lobbying arm that is down in the DC area, obviously advocating for legislation that is favorable for Bitcoin and crypto together. They are crypto in general, not Bitcoin only. Whereas compared to like the Bitcoin Policy Institute is focused on Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. So love what Dave Zell, Grant McCarty are doing over at the Bitcoin Policy Institute and many other people there. But yeah, so basically Circle and Kraken are teaming up to launch the BA Pact. I don't know why they just wouldn't partner up with the Coin Center. I guess they feel like they're not doing a good job. You know, I don't know why they'd start their own lobbying arm instead of backing that group, but very interesting to see. Yeah, and we'll see what comes out of it, basically.
Yes, indeed. It seems as though Bitcoin and crypto, just in general, are getting more and more involved in the political realm. But talking about politicians or former politicians and friend of the show, Anthony Scaramucci, announces his big news at the SALT conference that Bill Barhide of Abra Global announces the formation of Abra Bank, the first depository institution for crypto in the United States. It's interesting, but always remember, it's not your keys, not your coins. And also, Mooch, I love you, bro, but enough with this shit coining, man. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I don't know what this bank is going to mean. Like, obviously, they can accept deposits and withdrawals and stuff like that. It's going to be interesting. Like, I'm assuming they're going to try and offer yield. Yeah, I don't know. Not your keys, not your coins. That's my only warning if you use one of these services.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some mainstream business, though.
Yes, so Ledger Nano X and Nano S Plus hardware wallets are now available in all Best Buy stores throughout the United States. This is very interesting. I will caveat and say, be careful when you are buying these devices to make sure that the packaging was not opened or appears to be tampered with. I started with a ledger myself. I have now graduated to devices that are Bitcoin only. As you use devices that have other cryptocurrencies on them, you open yourself up for more risk, as in the device can be compromised through malware through these other cryptocurrencies. So I like to focus on Bitcoin only devices personally. But yeah, it's very cool that it's going mainstream and that some people have Bitcoin. I understand that they may have crypto, more power to them if they want to do that. I will just caveat and say be very, very careful. A lot of times when you're buying these devices online, I'd recommend only buying from the manufacturer themselves. If you do buy at a Best Buy, make sure that the package is not opened, tampered with, anything like that. It has been a known scam for at least the last 5 or 6 years that people will relist these devices on Amazon at cheaper prices. But then when you go to load up your Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies onto the device, you're really just sending it to the hacker, as in they've tampered with the software to be like, oh, I'm sending this to this address, but it's not yours. It's actually the hacker's address. So that's just the one caveat if you do buy one of these devices from Best Buy. That's pretty much it.
Thank you for that update, Chris. And I want to just reiterate something. I personally would rather be buying any of my hardware devices directly from the source. Something tells me that the randos at Best Buy, some of them may know what's going on, but most of them probably won't. They won't be able to answer your questions. Love the Bitcoiner creators in this space. They're always so helpful and willing to answer your questions. So when in doubt, shoot those people a DM, reach out to them, blow their DMs up, do it. NVK is probably going to hate me for saying that one. All right, we're going to talk Alex McShane, also known as Brian Armstrong. We're going to talk Coinbase. The brother of a former Coinbase manager pleads guilty to insider trading. This is the first insider trading case involving cryptocurrency, and he pleaded guilty on Monday to wire fraud conspiracy charges. I mean, this seems like a muted down almost charge versus the actual insider trading charge that could have been brought against them. Some sort of deal is taking place behind the shadows. Interesting to say the least, because this would imply, in theory, that cryptocurrencies are deemed as securities in the eyes of the law, if in fact they can be illegally traded in this way. So when SEC ruling on that Ripple case?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
It's just interesting. The precedent here is not as concerning, but I think this gives strength to the SEC's case. Should more insider trading cases be brought to light and people actually plead guilty, because that means they did it and that they agree that there was insider trading. And if there's insider trading, that means there needs to be some sort of a security that is being traded. So that's just connecting a few extra dots because it's Friday. And yeah. Chris, let's talk Fidelity.
Yeah, so Fidelity is bringing Bitcoin trading on its brokerage platform. To just give some caveat to this, I know we've said Fidelity is one of the biggest, financial brokers in the world. They have over 34 million accounts and over 4.5 trillion with a T assets under management. So this is like really big. I think that this is, Bitcoin going to the masses. They did have a crypto task force that was tasked with trying to investigate. I think it was upwards of 50 different cryptocurrencies from the years of 2016 to 2019 that they subsequently shut down in 2019. Earlier this year or tail end of last year, they came out with a Bitcoin. It was called the Digital Assets Report, but in it, they highlighted that they see Bitcoin as the only asset that they see worth investing in right now at this day and age. I will say that this is awesome. We've come to the same conclusion, at least myself and Q. I know Q likes to dabble in the equity, so maybe Fidelity can hook them up with some premium ways to invest in those as well. But it's very interesting that they only came to Bitcoin only after doing basically 4 years of research, and they actually shut down that task force. They were kind of like, there's nothing else really here. We see it as Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. I think that's very, very interesting for sure.
I'm going to say and just throw these words out into the ecosystem, not because they're true. They are in fact not true, but this is more like I'm trying to manifest this. But Bitcoin Magazine Live is the official podcast of Fidelity's Bitcoin operations. I don't know. It's got a nice ring to it. All I'm saying, Fidelity. That's it for Monday. There's a lot of news this week, but hopping over to Tuesday, as you know, as we did mention on the show, US CPI came in at 8.3%, a little bit higher than was anticipated. This is still lower than last month's reading. People are saying, oh, inflation is going down. Do not lose sight. This is a year over year number, and it's not saying, oh, it's actually decreased. Now, it's still saying over the last year, there's been 8.3% inflation. So, yeah. How about that rate hike next week? All eyes will be on the FOMC meeting. Decision will be made on Wednesday. It will be happening live while we are on this show. We will update you as to what the Fed's decision is. And then, of course, Ansel and CK will be following that up with an episode of Fed Watch shortly after Powell's press conference is wrapped. Chris, let's talk OFAC. You're muted.
Thank you for that. I pulled a P there. I'm sorry. I miss him, so I had to do it. So OFAC says they are aware of the Tornado Cash dusting attacks and will not prioritize enforcement against recipients. What is a dusting attack? So Tornado Cash was the open source mixer or coin joining implementation on the Ethereum blockchain. We've talked about it a lot. Basically, they were sanctioning Tornado Cash. Normally, when the OFAC group sanctions, normally an individual or a group, they do exactly that. In this case, they were sanctioning free and open source software. So when that happened, one of the large whales that was using Tornado Cash was sending small bits of Ether to various people in the Ethereum ecosystem. So, they sent, if you had an address, they were basically sending you small bits of Ethereum or Ether to do so. And, obviously in the hopes that OFAC can't they can't prioritize enforcement against everyone that receives all this, which basically they came out and said that they can't do. OFAC says U.S. individuals may apply for a license to withdraw crypto deposited in Tornado Cash prior to August 8th. So obviously that timeline has already passed. We are now, September 16th as we are speaking. But it's pretty insane that they are saying you need to apply for a license for free and open source software code. As we've previously said on the show, that Coinbase has brought up a lawsuit against the Treasury Department and OFAC. And it'll be, this is going to be a drawn out case that's going to probably take months, if not years, to conclude. But Coinbase is obviously going after him, and their main thesis of the argument is that these sanctions against Tornado Cash is actually an attack on free speech. It has been ruled a couple times in the Supreme Court already, at least 3 times that I know of, that code is speech and speech is protected under the First Amendment. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. It remains to see how this unfolds, but we'll keep you updated as more and more comes out about it. Anything you want to add there, Q? How crazy is it? You need to apply for a license to use free and open source code. Imagine they do it with Bitcoin. You're like, hey, you need a license now by the government.
I mean, we've said this so much whenever we brought up the Tornado Cash debacle. Any and all of these attempts at subverting open source software can and will be attacks that will eventually be used against Bitcoin. So while we say it in jest today, this may become a reality in a not so distant future. No Bitcoiner should be cheering for this, regardless of the fact that this is happening on a different blockchain to an entirely different network. While we're on the topic of just, I guess we're not really on the topic of scammers, but I want to talk about scammers.
I got you. So Alex Mashinsky has a plan to revive Celsius. So he's calling it Kelvin. So synonymous for those that are engineers. There's Fahrenheit, there's Celsius, and Kelvin is another name for a temperature scale. And he's comparing it to a corporate turnaround at major banks. So he said, and this is Alex Mashinsky's words: Delta filed for bankruptcy. He told employees last week, "You do not fly. You can't tell me you do not fly Delta because they filed for bankruptcy. No, they fly Delta." They fly Delta because Delta didn't keep their money and threatened to never give it back when they went bankrupt. So it's just very, very interesting. Obviously Delta filed for bankruptcy, but still they were, allowing people to do flights and stuff like that. And obviously ownership was changed hands. It gets very, very different when it comes to money and not giving people their money back. So Q, anything else that you want to bring up there?
Yes, I want to bring up D348's comment because I know McShane is out there listening. You should be sure to be looking at the screen right now, McShane. No, the only thing I'm going to say is I think it's funny that he's going from Celsius to Kelvin and not Fahrenheit because he knows in America he'd get wrecked. All right. On the topic of scammers, Do Kwon's days may just be numbered. A South Korean court seeks to arrest the developer of failed cryptocurrency Luna. I mean, yeah, that was a bit of a like clickbaity almost like tagline gotcha because aren't people like um oh my god, who's in charge of the entire Mexican cartel right now?
I don't know Mexican cartel that well.
Really?
I don't know, man.
El Chapo.
El Chapo. Okay.
El Chapo has like a freaking arrest warrant on his head too. And like, I mean, he breaks out of jail every 6 months. So I'm just like, this is really cool. Like, good for South Korea. Like, go after the guy. But like, this guy has so much money. Like, let's be real. He is gonna buy an island and go hide and never be found again. Or his ego could be so large that he actually like thinks that he's in the right. Either way, the Do Kwon saga does not end anytime soon. I'm
Yeah.
done giving this oxygen though, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I'll just say I know he was in Singapore last I heard. Not to dox him, I just know that's where he resided. But and Singapore is known to be kind of like a sanctuary state, or like they're kind of known for trying to protect their people and people that move there. It was a way to like innovate and try and bring in capital, and whether it's actual money capital or intellectual capital into the country. So it remains to be seen if they would like hand him over to South Korean authorities. Somehow I don't think they will, but that doesn't mean that basically if he tries to travel anywhere, the South Korean government might try and grab him. But skipping on to that and talking about real developers that create real things, what do we got for you, Q? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I pulled a P. Cashew, a Chaumian eCash wallet and mint with early Bitcoin and Lightning support, has been launched. A disclaimer from the lead developer: I'm not a cryptographer. There are likely serious bugs in Cashew. I built this over the weekend, so it's very unfinished and probably broken. I don't mean to laugh. My hat goes off to this person to not only just like get it done, put it out there, but also they're not saying don't use this. They're almost saying, hey, there are mistakes in this. Rip it apart, like find them, like let's work together and make this a better product. I love this. This is almost in the vein of Satoshi's vision of like, hey, this is helpful. Let me share it with the world and everyone. Let's work on it. The real Satoshi. Sorry, couldn't help
I
myself
mean,
there.
it's the nature of free and open source software. Like if there's bugs or issues, you got to bring it up to the developers or change it yourself. I was one of the first users of RoboSats actually, and I did not know that. Odell was like, hey man, just use RoboSats to get some sats. So I used it, and the copy paste function did not work, and then my Tor browser crashed. So I was having issues with it, but they fixed it now. I still got my sats, so we're all good, but it could have been an issue for sure. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, please. Let's go to Electrum.
Yeah, so Electrum Wallet, one of the longest standing desktop wallets in the space. It's been around since I believe 2011 or 2010. Has a suspected scam. A suspected scammer was arrested by the Dutch police. The 37-year-old suspect was a suspect of laundering tens of millions of euros obtained from malicious software using decentralized exchange BIS and privacy coin Monero. He stole the funds using malicious software, pretending to be linked to Electrum. So basically, people would go think that they're installing Electrum on their computer, and they're actually installing malware that was exactly what I said before with the Ledger hack. Like if you get a device that's compromised, basically you're installing it onto your website, and you're like, hey, let me send a Bitcoin to this receive address that I think is my Electrum, and it was actually going to his wallet, and then he was laundering the money through using various coin joins or mixers, and then also using Monero. So obviously he was caught. It is very, very, very important to verify what you're downloading using PGP, which we don't have time to get into now, but it's very important to make sure that you're not downloading malicious malware, especially when it comes to being your own bank. So yeah, I just think that that's very, very interesting. Be careful what you download. Check, don't trust, verify. So yep, that's pretty much it for my end.
Yeah, dude. On that note, I know this went around our company Slack channel, but apparently like, Uber's Slack got hacked, and we saw the reports of that as well. And I got another story for you guys, and just to show that I'm not biased towards Iran. Chris, I read this report. I actually disagree with the way you took it. The U.S. Treasury doesn't hate Iran. A couple of Iranian coders got caught sending out ransomware and trying to hack through different company servers. It's reported that The wallet, when it was followed on chain, had in its lifetime just under 2.5 Bitcoin. So really only 50K, which in USD may not be a lot, but when you transfer that over to Iran, like you're sitting pretty. So that is a significant chunk of change for Iranians. But yeah, the US has blacklisted several more Bitcoin addresses tied to these ransomware attacks. Saylor made headlines this week as well. Chris, what did he talk about?
Yeah, so Michael Saylor sets the record straight about Bitcoin mining. So obviously, the White House just dropped their report talking about they were basically advocating for CBDCs, and they were saying that digital assets are a risk, where CBDCs are safe, private, and they're going to be a great thing. So, and also there was some things that were talked about with Bitcoin mining being such a waste of energy. So, so regarding, he was basically just sharing an article talking about all the ways how Bitcoin mining uses so much renewable energy, how it's actually good for the environment, how it's actually protecting a global network, and many of the points that he's listed before. So, yep, this is Michael Saylor countering the FUD from the White House report that has come out.
Love to see it. I mean, Saylor must be really busy now that he's not the CEO of MicroStrategy, that he can write up these reports. And I digress. Let's go to Coinbase. So we talk a lot on this show about politicians who insider trade stocks. Oh, sorry, that was a little edgy. We talk a lot on this show about how politicians insider trade stocks, and there's no accountability, and we just kind of like have come to accept this. Unfortunately, whether or not we like it, we do. It looks like Coinbase actually is finally sick of it, and Coinbase on Wednesday announced that Coinbase will begin to integrate their crypto policy efforts right into their apps. This will help with over 103 million verified users to get educated on the crypto positions held by political leaders where they live. And now you can start to see the incentives and why certain politicians are going to support certain crypto and blockchain initiatives. You're going to be able to tell in real time which projects they actually hold their own and which ones they stand to benefit by certain legislation going through. I'll be interested to see the response out of Congress if there's any pushback by this decision, but ultimately, I think we're about to see a lot more regulation get thrown into the entire blockchain and broader crypto ecosystem as a result of something like this. Chris, we talked a lot about El Salvador today. Can we go back down there for a moment?
Yeah, so my first Bitcoin published a workbook in El Salvador. The workbook is called Diplomado and Bitcoin. It's taught and it'll be taught in public schools in El Salvador. So obviously, they're a company, they're publishing a workbook that they hope to be picked up and be taught to various people or kids in El Salvador talking about Bitcoin. So very, very cool initiative, furthering Bitcoin education to the kids of El Salvador, basically.
Awesome. Love to see it. Love helping local communities and educating the next generation, especially on the importance of Bitcoin. Hats off to everyone working on that project down in El Salvador. Moving on to Thursday, because at some point we started talking about Wednesday news and I didn't let you know, but I'll let you know now we're on Thursday. And the big news out of yesterday, of course, was the Ethereum merge was completed. And yet again, I call upon all viewers and listeners of Bitcoin Magazine Live, if you see P on the streets, please, citizens arrest, force a shoe leather down his throat. It is time for him to pay up on his debt or on his bet. Do not welch. Don't be a little bitch, P. But on the topic of the merge, it went through. They have a lot of unconfirmed transactions building on their mempool. It's already seen support from the World Economic Forum. The attacks on proof of work have begun. In fact, there was an attack yesterday, Chris, if you want to take us through that.
Yeah, so Greenpeace intensifies their campaign against Bitcoin following the Ethereum merge. They've been spending over $1 million on the Change the Code campaign to try and have regulators try and force Bitcoin to change from proof of work consensus over to proof of stake consensus mechanism. Follow the incentives, and I'll show you the outcome. Basically, what they're doing is they're trying to advocate for people using their blockchain or their crypto or whatever it may be. If that occurs, obviously, you would assume the price of that asset would go up. And they are doing this because they feel that there's no way for them to compete against Bitcoin. So they feel that the only way that they can truly compete is by regulating it out of existence using the legal landscape and competitive moats that regulators give you. Obviously, a lot of people were in the comments saying you can change the code. It's free and open source software. You can literally take Bitcoin, copy it, and change it to whatever you want. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. Obviously, there is Bitcoin as long as you fall within the consensus mechanism or you follow the rules of, not double spending, not having more than 21 million Bitcoin, all the different things that we've agreed on when you are looking at the origins of Bitcoin. You can transact freely between other wallets and wallet implementations. So obviously they are trying to use the political apparatus for their gain. Anything else you want to add there, Q?
No, I thought you covered it really well. I mean, look, ultimately, there needs to be a greater understanding on the individual level of Bitcoiners of why proof of work is actually the most valuable component of Bitcoin and why it should, in fact, be difficult to make money and it should not be held in control by small individual entities. I forget the other one, but I know since the merge has gone through, Coinbase is now, because so many people are staking their Ethereum through Coinbase. Coinbase has become the largest staker on the Ethereum network. Brian Armstrong.
Actually, I'll caveat that they're second largest. Lido is the top one. I think Lido is I forget what it's based of, but like Coinbase is 2, Lido is number 1. I think Lido is the Ethereum Foundation, but I could be wrong.
Okay, fine, fair. But between these two, it's like almost 50% of the entire staking network is covered between Vitalik and Brian Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into this debate with a friend last night where he was like, well, I trust Vitalik. I was like, that's fair. I mean, I just don't want to have to trust anyone because that's how we got in this situation. We trusted a lot of people along the way and they fucked up. And I'm over it.
Yeah,
that's
Q,
just my take though.
I think we bring it up a lot. It's like, it's whether you trust Vitalik or not, that's fine. But then like, you can't bitch about Jerome Powell because then Vitalik just becomes Jerome Powell. So like, exactly. You can't have it both ways. Like if you're like, get mad at central banks and bankers for doing what they're doing, then you can't get mad at Vitalik when this inevitable thing happens just in the crypto ecosystem. Does that make sense? Or is that a good breakdown you feel?
Totally. It's exactly like that. It is. If you think Jerome Powell and the Fed have been doing a crack up job for the last 15 years, even, I got a horse to sell you. That's for damn sure. But I got some cryptocurrency that you would love. Bitcoin ain't for you if that's the case. But if you're like most of us and you think that the incompetence runs far and wide, not just in your own country, but in every country around the world, why the fuck do you think any one founder knows better than some central planner who devoted their life, for better or worse, to thinking that they know what they're doing? I just think it's foolish, but I'm not here to judge.
Yeah, now we're going across the pond to other central bankers across Europe. Q, break it down for us.
Essentially, it looks like a digital euro must be green, private, and possibly capped. Conversations are happening in real time. And a leaked paper written by France, Germany, and Italy seeks to guide the European Central Bank's policy for the digital currency. I think this isn't too surprising. We're going to see a lot more attempts at a CBDC come forward. It just might not be called a CBDC every single time, but it is going to be important to read between the lines and understand a central bank issued digital currency is the strongest form of government surveillance that has ever been rolled out by a nation state in human society's history. And to accept a CBDC without understanding that trade-off is a very naive approach to the global financial system. I do not believe the global powers who are making these decisions are aloof to that. In fact, I think that is actually in the pros column when they have their little pros and cons little chart on a little like giant whiteboard behind them. They'll just do pros, super control of people, hardcore surveillance. People can't do anything we don't like. We need to hammer that point home a lot. Like anyone who is in support of a CBDC is probably a spook. You should call them out on that. Bully them online. In fact, do it. Like honestly, everyone should go on Twitter right now and just search CBDC and any tweet that is positive CBDC. Let's just go. That's this weekend's assignment. We're going to go troll all proponents of CBDCs on Twitter this weekend.
Did you ever see Ted Lasso when he's like, "Yeah, let's go find the referee in the parking lot"? Do not do that, anyone. That's not financial advice. That's not actual advice. That's what Q's going to do this weekend, but we will not be held liable for whatever he does.
I'm gonna go off the fucking grid and no one's gonna hear from me again. What? Chris, let's talk China before we talk about the news from today.
China's back, baby. Well, not really. Kind of, maybe, not really. They banned it. They hate it. They love it. They hate it. So China has ruled that the Chinese courts approve crypto trading, but it's not to be used as a cash substitute. So obviously, it's hard to keep track whether China loves it or hates it or bans it or makes it illegal or makes it legal, whatever. Basically, Chinese courts has ruled that citizens can still trade cryptocurrencies, reneging an old ruling saying they could not do that. So it was notable that they banned cryptocurrency trading, citing a threat to their financial sector stability. But I guess their financial sector is having problems, so they need it back to get more of the tax revenues. That's what I'm just speculating on. But they basically ruled that you can trade it now again. With that being said, though, you cannot use it as a cash substitute. So it is still illegal for me to get cryptocurrency, whatever kind, and then use it at a vendor or market or store or whatever. So while they can still trade the assets to and from, other assets, they're not allowed to use it as a cash or payment system. So China's back, sort of, kind of, not really. But I hope that clarifies everything.
China's back, baby. Only a little bit though. But I mean, this is not really surprising news. So they'll change their mind next week. Doesn't matter. TikTok next block. Now on to Friday. We're almost done, guys. Bitcoin bad. CBDC's good. Uh-oh. We just talked about this. No, we didn't. This time it's the White House. The White House releases their first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. Quote, digital assets pose meaningful risks, end quote, while a, quote, U.S. CBDC has the potential to offer significant benefits, end quote. Remember that pros and cons little whiteboard that the European Central Bank has? Well, guess what? Looks like Biden and team just stole it. And in the pros column, they saw all of the surveillance stuff. And on the heels of Biden's fucking crazy, almost Hitler-esque speech from a week and a half ago, it seems like he's really adamant on having control over everyone's money, and especially those who he doesn't agree with. Man, it used to be really fun in this country.
We used to have nice things, Q. We used to have nice things.
We really did. And it's crazy to me that something like a CBDC, and we're going to get into this in a week and a half, and I'm really excited, and I'm going to tease that conversation with Natalie Smolensky, who works over the Bitcoin Policy Institute, who's actually written a white paper on CBDCs and is being submitted to Congress through the BPI. Let me tell you, she is not a fan of CBDCs and draws an excellent connection between why a CBDC is a tool that a surveillance state like China would use. But however, the fact that we are seeing a growing turn of Western democracies entertain the idea of a CBDC should be a concern, that the values and ideas of Western democracy are actually fading away. And the values and ideas of surveillance states like China are growing, at least at the powers that be level, who get to make these decisions on what they control and who they control. This is very scary. The U.S. is turning into China much quicker than I think we want to admit. Well, I used to crack that joke all the time of like, well, eventually China's just going to own the U.S. anyways. Well, no, it looks like the U.S. is just going to turn into China on its own without any sort of forced sale. Wild to me, but let's keep going down this Biden rabbit hole.
Yeah, so there's kind of like four big things that I want to point out. So, right, just kind of what Q was mentioning, the Treasury Department will be heading up, creating and trying to formulate a central bank digital currency. So Q was like, hey, we see the benefits, we want one. Central bank digital currencies are good, digital assets are bad. The report also urged the CFTC, as we've been talking about, and the SEC to develop regulations and rules for guidances for digital asset ecosystem risks, including the potential for currencies to be used in money laundering and wire fraud. So those are the first two. Third, the White House is asking that Congress amend and change the Bank Secrecy Act to apply to digital asset service providers, including cryptocurrency exchanges, platforms for NFTs or non-fungible tokens, and it would also require lenders to report suspicious transactions to the Treasury Department. And then the last and final thing is Biden will also consider recommendations from agencies to create a federal framework. So this would be taking under the purview of the federal government of how they should oversee non-payment bank providers. So it's very, very interesting. This could be very damaging for Bitcoin and the crypto ecosystem at large. Obviously, they want more of the things under their purview. It remains to be seen where companies like BTC Pay Server or Voltage or companies like this, that they're not actually digital asset providers. They're not an exchange, but technically, or even people that run Lightning nodes or nodes in general that route payments. Like, oh, are you now seen as like a brokerage or an exchange, or do you need to apply for a license? Exactly what we were talking about earlier in this episode with the Tornado Cash. Like, hey, you need to apply for a license to run free and open source software. So it remains to be seen. Obviously, this report just came out this morning. There's been a lot of things refuting it, and obviously, I know the people at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, as probably Coin Center, as well as the new lobbying group that we talked about coming out of Kraken and Circle, are probably busy at work today and probably through the weekend for comments on Monday. But yeah, there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline. And I think they're going to table a lot of these till after the midterm elections. And then they're, depending on how the elections shake out, is what they're going to try and push forward. But it's very, very interesting. And I know there's a strong push to basically sanction or try and hamper or get rid of just Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, because they see it as a threat to their power. You're muted.
It's all about their power. I'm going to move on to OFAC, Chris, unless there's anything else we want to touch on here.
Nope, keep going.
So, and just like that, OFAC tries to backtrack. OFAC backtracks, but Tornado Cash sanctions already set a terrifying precedent. On September 13th, the U.S. Treasury Department provided some clarity on the Tornado Cash sanctions. The federal agency updated its FAQs to say that interacting with open source code itself is not illegal. However, this came with a caveat. This interaction is only legal as long as it does not include a prohibited transaction. U.S. persons would not be prohibited by U.S. sanctions from visiting the Internet Archive, copying code, or publishing the code. Coinbase lawsuit claims that the sanctions themselves were a violation of the First Amendment. By sanctioning open source code, they are limiting free speech. I mean, it's that last line. It's ultimately, if code is deemed speech, then all code should, in theory, be protected by the First Amendment. This is precedent. Whether or not you like Ethereum, whether or not you want to see it crumble, collapse, and go down to nothing, this is precedent being set that eventually will be used against Bitcoin. It would be naive to think otherwise, and it is a very scary and dark precedent being set on the heels of us talking about a CBDC getting rolled out in this country. So not only do they want to roll out a CBDC in which they will control, at the same time, they want to take away our rights to be able to use open source software in order to, I don't know, do anything. This isn't stuff you would think would be happening in the United States of America, but it's slowly and quietly happening. And before we know it, we will have lost rights without ever having an opportunity to stand up and fight against losing those rights.
Yeah, I mean, look at it like I like taking people to history because, I'm going to insult Democrats and Republicans here. I know people are going to hate this, but Clinton basically interacted, the exit clause. Basically, if you're trying to leave the United States and move to a different country, there's a huge tax before you do so. Obviously, under Bush, they did, the Patriot Act and the Bank Secrecy Act and all these things to protect you because we're worried about money laundering and helping the terrorists. And we're worried about, terrorists communicating within the United States. So they invaded your privacy and they took away your right to transact. Obama further didn't remove any of those things. He's like, hey, we want to attack big banks. He only strengthened them. He got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. He got rid of a lot of things that could help them monopolize and basically, punch down on the lower class citizens. Q, you remember at the end of the Big Short, how many bankers went to jail? This is a good trivia question. One, correct. And it was just some lowly junior executive that was like, hey, buddy, you got to take one fall for the team. And he went to a nice white collar prison for 2 years, got out after 13 months on good behavior. So ultimately, how bad is that?
paid.
Yes, he did. His family got taken care of, and when he got out, he could retire, which is pretty.
That's like that
crazy.
mafia fucking shit, by the way. Like, can we like pause and reflect on that? To go to jail on behalf of your company and have your family be paid as a result of that is some shit straight out of a fucking mafia movie. But no, ladies and gentlemen, that's what happened in 2008 in the United States to a fucking banker.
Yeah. And then going under Trump, I know this is a hot button topic, but even with the Black Lives Matter thing, there was ways to try and prevent protests. Obviously, a right to protest. Whether you like it or you agree or disagree with the process that's going on. There was a lot of things at various state levels as well as federal levels is trying to prevent protests from occurring. So specifically around the Black Lives Matter movement and protests that were going on. And then even, as of the repeal of the Roe versus Wade, obviously, whichever way the argument you stand on, if you're pro-choice or pro-life, a lot of what they're trying to do is another privacy infringement. So that if you try and get an abortion and you're caught, that they report you to the federal government or the state government, and they can go after you, jail you, fine you, take your money, and all these different things. It's a privacy infringement. And then obviously we've seen with the Biden administration, obviously all these sanctions or ways of sanctioning tornado cash. Obviously that's the Treasury Department, but in his administration, as well as they're trying to clamp down on digital assets. And, as stealing a quote from Christine Lagarde, obviously she's from the European Central Bank, but, if there's an exit hatch, we need to quelch or stomp down on all those exit hatches to prevent people from fleeing to those things. So, it's just kind of like been an encroachment on your rights. And with all those things, the new president could come in and be like, hey, we can get rid of this exit tax. Hey, we can get rid of the Patriot Act. Hey, we can, repeal or put in things that stop the monopolies from forming and all this. But, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. There, obviously, the politicians are there to benefit from these clamping down of regulations, as well as they can get more money and control by doing so. So that's pretty much it. Q, anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, man, it would have been really nice if we just, for one presidential cycle, had an outsider who ran under a lot of promises to, like, I don't know, like just unclog the drain and drain the swamp and, be done with the ways of the old and really change things for the better. It would be really, really cool if that fucking idiot who had been elected under that platform actually followed through and did those things. But no, he didn't.
I think the system's so broken. It's like if you are even like that honorable, true man or woman elected as president, I just don't think you could. I think that the system of the senators, congressmen, and women, it's not built for one person to be that powerful to win and drain that system. So I just don't think we ever will. Vote with your money, buy Bitcoin, opt out. Not financial advice, kind of financial advice, whatever.
I want to not end the week on such a somber note. What's a bullish thought you have to share with our audience as we wind down here?
My bullish thing is when Bitcoin is attacked, it only gets stronger. So I just say bring it on. Things are going to be more difficult in the short run, but in the long term, it's going to be better. Buy Bitcoin peer-to-peer, non-KYC. I think that's your best bet, and learn all the privacy tools and practices for using Bitcoin. So I'm really bullish on that. I'm bullish on Bitcoiners. I'm bullish on humanity. I'm bullish on freedom. Let's get it.
And with that, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, dudes and dudettes, it is about that time for me to remind you once again to like and subscribe down below here on YouTube. Up here, I'm going to get it right one day. Up here over on Rumble is the subscribe button. Would love it if you joined us over on Rumble. And of course, as always, stay humble, stack sats, onward and upward. We'll be back next week.